For months, there were whispers, low-volume rumors, half-heard conversations, vague references floating around the internet that most people ignored. But then, without warning, a single post detonated across social media. No press conference, no legal filing made public, just a statement posted online that instantly reframed everything we thought we knew. Elon Musk, one of the most powerful and controversial figures on the planet, publicly declared that he intended to file for full custody of his infant son, Romulus. For many people, that sentence alone was shocking. For others, it raised an even bigger question. Since when did Elon Musk have a one-year-old son that the public barely knew existed? Until that moment, Romulus had lived almost entirely outside of Musk's carefully controlled public image. No red carpet appearances, no proud interviews, no casual mentions. And yet suddenly, this child was at the center of a storm involving ideology, identity, parenthood, power, and fear. Musk's statement didn't just announce a legal intention. It carried an accusation, one that immediately set the internet on fire. He claimed he was taking this step because of statements that, in his words, implied that the child's mother might support transitioning a one-year-old boy. The reaction was instant and violent. Supporters applauded him for protecting his son. Critics accused him of weaponizing fear. Neutral observers scrambled to understand what had actually been said and what had not. Because here's the detail that changed everything. Despite the outrage, despite the headlines, despite the trending hashtags, there was and still is no public evidence that Ashley St. Clair ever said she planned to transition their child. No clip, no quote, no post, nothing concrete. And yet the accusation alone was enough to turn a private custody dispute into a global spectacle. That's when people started digging. And what they found made the story far more complicated than a single social media post could ever explain. Ashley St. Clair was not silent before this explosion. In fact, just days earlier, she had done something that many public figures never do. She apologized. Publicly. Directly. Without excuses. She acknowledged past transphobic remarks and expressed remorse for the pain her words may have caused, including harm directed toward Musk's transgender daughter, Vivian. In her statement, she spoke about guilt, about responsibility, and about the private work she claimed to be doing to educate herself and advocate for the transgender community. To some, it sounded sincere. To others, it felt calculated. But what nobody expected was that this apology would become the trigger for a custody war that would play out in front of millions. And here's where you need to stay with me. Because this story is not about one tweet, one apology, or one accusation. What follows next changes the timeline completely and reveals that this battle didn't begin online at all. It began quietly, legally, and long before Elon Musk decided to speak. Stay right here. Now, this is the part of the story that almost nobody talks about, and that's exactly why it matters. Long before Elon Musk announced anything publicly, before the internet chose sides, before the outrage machine went into overdrive, Ashley St. Clair had already taken legal action. She had already gone to court. She had already asked for sole custody. And she had already sought legal recognition of Musk as Romulus's father in New York. In other words, the move that shocked the world was not the beginning of the fight. It was a response. When St. Clair publicly revealed that she had a child with Musk in early 2025, many people treated it like a sudden revelation. But the reality is far more layered. Romulus was born months earlier, in September of the previous year. The child had existed quietly, shielded from the spotlight, while legal conversations were already unfolding behind closed doors. That changes the entire power dynamic. Because once you understand that both sides had already made legal moves, Musk's public declaration stops looking like a spontaneous act of concern and starts looking like a strategic escalation. And escalation is exactly what followed. Social media didn't just react. It fractured. On one side, people framed Musk as a father stepping in to protect his child from ideological harm. On the other, critics argued that he was exploiting fear around gender identity to gain leverage in a custody dispute. The absence of concrete evidence didn't slow the narrative. In fact, it made it more dangerous. When people fill gaps with assumptions, those assumptions harden into beliefs, and beliefs quickly turn into weapons. Meanwhile, St. Clair's apology continued to circulate, dissected line by line. Some praised her for growth. Others dismissed it as damage control. But what stood out was something subtle and unsettling. Her apology mentioned learning, advocacy, and private effort, but it did not include any statement about her son's gender, identity, or future. That omission became a Rorschach test. Supporters saw restraint. Critics saw evasion. And into that ambiguity stepped Musk, whose words carried far more weight than silence ever could. At this point, the story stopped being about two parents. It became about culture, about who gets to define a child's identity, about whether ideology belongs in parenting decisions, about whether powerful figures should ever air family disputes in public. Every tweet, every comment, every reaction video added another layer to the fire. And yet, despite the noise, there was still one undeniable truth hanging in the air. No official court filing confirming Musk's custody request had appeared in public records. No representatives from either side were speaking. The legal reality remained opaque, while the public narrative ran wild. And this is where the tension peaks. Because when silence follows a public accusation, people don't wait for facts. They choose narratives. And once a narrative is chosen, walking it back becomes almost impossible. What happens next doesn't just affect one family. It sets a precedent, and the final implications are far bigger than custody alone. Stay with me, because this is where everything converges. By now, you can probably feel it. This story is not slowing down. It is coiling tighter, because underneath the headlines and the outrage, there's a deeper question that nobody seems ready to answer. What happens when one of the most influential people in the world turns a private legal conflict into a public moral statement? And what happens when that statement is built on implication rather than proof? The internet thrives on certainty, but this situation offers none. Only fragments. Only timing. Only power. Musk's words landed harder because of who he is, not because of what was proven. St. Clair's silence became louder because of what she didn't say, not because of what she did. And in the middle of it all is a child who never asked to become a symbol in a global culture war. This is why people cannot stop talking about it, because it forces uncomfortable conversations about parental rights, about gender identity, about accountability, and about the ethics of public exposure. Some see a father protecting his son. Others see a mother being publicly cornered. Many see a system where truth struggles to survive once millions of strangers decide they already know how the story should end. And right now, the story is still unfolding. No confirmed filings. No official statements. No resolution. Just tension. Just speculation. Just a growing sense that whatever happens next will echo far beyond this one family. That's why you stayed. That's why this matters. And that's why your voice matters too. If you made it this far, do not just leave silently. Scroll down and comment your thoughts. But don't just write team this or team that. Tell us why. Explain your reasoning. Do you think going public was necessary or reckless? Do apologies matter if trust is already broken? And what responsibility do powerful figures have when their personal decisions reshape public discourse? Before you go, make sure you are subscribed. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next update, and hit the like button to push this conversation further. Because this story is not over, and the next chapter could arrive at any moment.